Grand Valley State University reports that there are approximately 5.5 million family owned businesses across America. Most businesses tend to one point or another struggle with the overlapping responsibilities of running a business and the management and ownership of their company. And if it's a family owned business, it's compounded if you're a family member of that same tribe. Martha Sullivan is a certified business advisor, recovering CPA, certified exit planning and value growth advisor who helps business owners build, buy, and transition their company. Sullivan says that established business owners avoid having tough conversations about transitions like the plague. Well, today, we won't avoid any difficult and tough conversations as Sullivan joins me to have a conversation about transition, business ownership, and the family dynamic. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Absolutely. So, Martha, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm excited to talk to you about business transitioning this morning. Great to see you this morning, and thank you so very much for being here.
Of course. Of course. I'm happy to be here.
So, Martha, I know that you're a business advisor that helps businesses build, transition, and buy their businesses. So, tell me all about the great work that you do to help people grow and sustain their businesses.
Yeah, it's really interesting work that I get to do, and it's pretty specialized, I guess is the best way of putting it. So many business owners are not familiar with what and how their business is ultimately going to be valued when they go to sell their company or transition it to the next generation. And so a lot of my work is around educating owners about that. And then when they're starting to think about, well, how do I bring the next gen up, or how do I actually get ready to sell the business? I help them understand why their value is what it is, and how they can improve it. And then I can help them also go through the preparation of going to market. I don't necessarily sell the businesses on their behalf, but am more an independent coach to help them understand the sale process, and who the various players are, what their interests are, and help them have the best outcome that they can.
Yeah, fabulous. And I also know that you work with family-owned businesses and help them sort of navigate that dynamic. So tell me about working with family-owned businesses and making sure that they get their most bang for their buck as well.
You're right, Kevin. I am a member of the Family Business Consulting Group, which is based out of Chicago, and we focus entirely on helping family businesses, family enterprises figure out how to be in business together and still enjoy, a Sunday dinner once in a while together. It's the transition process for a family business is very different, I think, from when an owner wants to sell it outright, because there are a lot of assumptions that come into play, and it can be very challenging for the players, regardless of what generation they're in, to understand that there are really three systems that they need to navigate in terms of the family systems, the ownership systems, if somebody is an owner in the company, and also the management of it. And each one of those requires you to wear a different hat, depending on what the issue is. So if, for example, if you and I were in a family business together and an issue came up, you might be raising an issue. We have to make a business decision. And in my head, I'm going, yeah, right. Kevin's just pushing my buttons. He just knows how to push all my buttons. And you're like, no, I'm wearing my owner hat right now. I'm not wearing I'm Kevin, your brother, and I know how to push your buttons. We have a real issue to deal with here. And so a lot of the work we do is around helping families develop their governance and systems for making decisions. And how are we going to talk to each other? What are our expectations for one another in these systems? So it's a privilege to do this work, and having worked in two family businesses at two different times, I really appreciate the world that family businesses live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And Martha, I was also curious to ask you about eliminating the emotional aspect of working or operating a family business. How do you do that successfully, and to make sure that the business is sustainable and you can still maintain those relationships?
That's where that governance comes in. And when I'm talking about governance, I'm talking really about the family committing to sitting down and talking through and agreeing on what are their shared values, how are they going to live those shared values, what are our expectations of one another. So they would probably put together a code of conduct or a code of behavior. They might put together some family employment policies outlining what their beliefs and values suggest are criteria for being a member of the employed force within the business. So for example, some family businesses, if you are family, there's such a heavy allegiance to the family that if you need a job, we'll find a job for you. Other family business cultures are take a different view and would suggest, no, we would love for you to come to the family business if there's an opening that you are qualified for. And as a family member, next generation, we want you to go work someplace else first and get real life experience, real business experience, if you will, in an environment that you aren't, a bloodline of. And so it's really a matter of sitting down and talking through and setting expectations and goals as a family for the family, for its ownership of this company, and for its management of the company. And that'll set the stage for the decisions that come later about do we keep it, do we sell it, do we transition it to the next generation, and how do we do that in a way that everybody can ultimately have a voice, if not a vote in, at least have a voice in and understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And Martha, I'm also wanting to talk to you this morning about business sustainability and diversification in terms of how do you make it a business model is nimble enough to change with the changing climate of the business world. I'm curious.
It may sound counterintuitive, but I really think it comes down to be nimble. You have to have discipline. You have to have systems in place that help you stay on top of what's going on in the market, in your industry, I'm a firm believer in business owners and their management teams having a strategic plan and operating to the strategic plan to their best abilities, but also doing check-ins on a quarterly basis to say, okay, these were the assumptions we had related to our business plans. Let's do a quick check-in. What are we seeing out there in the market? What's changing? Do we need to kind of shift it a little bit in response to what's going on, whether it be in terms of internal or external to the company. So I think that's a big part of it, is having that discipline to look at the business on a regular basis, having good financials so you understand what's going on with the market as well as your cash flow. And communication. Doesn't everything come down to communication? You got to be talking with each other and sharing information.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, life comes down to communication, doesn't it?
It really does.
Everything in life comes down to that. But I'm also wondering your thoughts. Just to share a little bit about myself. So I was actually born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. Simply means that I don't have enough oxygen in my legs to walk normally. And part of my professional background is helping individuals with an assortment of disabilities find and maintain employment. So I'm curious, how do you think we can develop an inclusive culture for individuals with disabilities to also be successful in business?
That's, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's one thing that I've been observing in a lot of the calamity of the pandemic. And there are a lot of organizations, I think, that are really still wrestling with the concept of remote work, and being flexible in meeting the needs of the individual employee and giving them the tools to contribute to the best of their abilities. And I've recently been working with a client that is really resistant to it. They're like, no, we need our people to be, if they're not seen, they can't possibly be working. And I kind of feel like that's a dark ages mentality these days. And by really fine tuning how we accommodate different modes of work for different employees' needs, I think that's a huge opportunity for creating a more inclusive environment. I also believe strongly, and I think I put together a blog post at one point on this topic, that the Great Resignation and the struggles that business owners claimed and do have in terms of finding employees, some of it is very, very real. Other parts of it have to do with their mindset and how open they are to varying candidates. I think they've got a lot of their HR systems tightened down so hard that they're disqualifying qualified candidates through their algorithms and their perspectives on what makes a good employee. And I think we have to take a really hard look in the mirror, honestly, to reflect that and make it more inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought something up that sparked my interest when you talked about the Great Resignation. As people go back to the office and go back to work, certainly the way we operate the day-to-day operations of a business or a workplace are changing. So I'm curious to ask you, how do we get people excited to go back to work and give them the flexibility to either adopt remote work or return to the office?
That's a really tricky question, Kevin. I think in terms of attracting people back to the workforce, um, I think my perception, and by all means, I am not an expert, but my perception is that more people are ready to go back to the workplace than perhaps before. When Omicron was raging and things were as kind of up and down as they were in 2021, I think there was real reluctance of, no, I want to be more protective of my health. I think the mood has changed from the perspective of, I think people are like over and done with it. There's a mentality that the pandemic is over and coronavirus is gone. And I don't think the science shows that, but I think our patience with it has diminished to the point that people are willing to go back into a work environment. That said, it's kind of like the horse is out of the barn, and people are used to working from home now. Those that have jobs that are conducive to remote work. Not all jobs are. And I truly believe businesses need to be more open and flexible to providing a hybrid type of work environment for the positions that are conducive to that. Because I don't think people want to be commuting every day or in the office every day, but I do think they want that social connection, and they want to see real people on a periodic basis, but they also like in their home office time. So I really think by attracting them with a hybrid, businesses are going to have much, much more success in getting people back to the workforce and adjusting their expectations. I think so many employers still have my way, highway type attitudes towards employees, and that's what a lot of the Great Resignation is about. Is no, I'm not staying on your highway. I'm going to go down a different road.
And tell me, my fundamental belief in business, Martha, is that life is the constant game of networking, right? We have to be able to make social and human connections, as you just mentioned. So I'm also wondering your thoughts on how you think business networking is changing, and the need for human connection is also evolving as well.
I agree with that. In the nature of the business that I'm in, networking is a significant part of it, and I think it's reflecting the need for that human connection. People are much more like, yeah, let's get together for coffee. It's like we're starved for that face-to-face connection. So I think it's also changed, though, because we're also being more mindful of, do I want to take the time when I can do a Zoom coffee now? I need to balance my time. And okay, so I can meet Kevin for coffee on Zoom, or I can burn an hour driving to the coffee shop and driving back from the coffee shop. What's the nature of the conversation? What are we doing today? Is it just to get together and shoot the breeze? Or, do we have real brass tack stuff we need to get? So I think people are going to make their choices differently now that we know that we've got the flexibility. But there's absolutely the time and place for getting together and breaking bread together and really having that face-to-face connection.
And I don't need to tell you as a business coach that, especially in the States, that inflation is certainly impacting the way that we do business all over the world, really. And the price of gas is also affecting the way businesses operate. So how do you think inflation and the price of goods is also affecting the way businesses operate today?
Well, it's hitting businesses right between the eyes, between the supply chain issues and the inflation, and they do go hand in hand. And classic supply and demand principles are applying, and The businesses that have the flexibility to pass along the cost increases are, but they're also very worried about, okay, how far can I push this? And how much of it do I take in my margin versus maintaining my margins? And every business is going to be different, but I do think that there's some serious conversations going on around margin. And for some businesses, it becomes a deal killer. And in other businesses where they already have high margins, they're going to be much more resilient and be able to flex for a while until this settles down. What I've been reading is people think it's the supply chain issues are still going to be pretty significant throughout this year and maybe be settling down in 23. So maybe we've turned a corner, but I don't know that we're quite around the corner in terms of it. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, fingers crossed for progress, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I've got a few more questions for you. The first starting with, I was curious to ask you about women in the workplace and closing the wage gap and also the way of the opportunity gap. Because, I strongly believe, whether it's women or people with disabilities, talent is equally distributable, but the access to opportunity isn't. So I'm curious about your thoughts on how women are progressing to positions of leadership in the workplace and the work we still have to do in that area.
Well, women took it in the teeth the last couple years as the pandemic and the school closures and things of that nature took root. A lot of the responsibility fell back on those that were moms or those that were caretakers. For example, if they had elderly parents that they needed to be mindful of and illness and all that sort of stuff. It also fell on the males as well. If there were children and working from home, it was, I'm eternally grateful that my kids are out of school at this point, because my heart was breaking for the parents of school-age children trying to navigate all that. But all indications are that it's been a significant setback for women. Some ended up having to leave the workforce because the demands and the expectations of the employer and the position weren't tenable with what they were facing in terms of their family environments. And so I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the inclusivity of employers and being willing to change their thinking on what makes a good employee and what doesn't, and how flexible they can be, and how empathetic employers and bosses are towards the situations that people are dealing with. I firmly believe that there is a lack of empathy in many organizations to be able to take a moment and pause and put yourself in the other person's shoes. I think it's easy for us to make assumptions based on where we sit in the world and what challenges we face on a day-to-day basis, but it's not as always easy to do that for somebody who is not you. And so by taking that breath and saying, oh, wait a second, my kids are out of school, so I don't need to worry about this. Oh, wait a second, go back a decade or so, Martha, how would that have been for you to deal with at that time? And start designing systems that are more empathetic, and that will help make the workforce more welcoming and balanced for females. And then we can get back on track with the wage differentials and all that. I mean, the wage differential has been an issue for forever. So it's that one's a slow walk.
Again, fingers crossed for progress in that
Penny
area.
by penny, penny by penny.
Of course. And to that point, in today's business climate, I'm also curious to ask you about establishing business longevity, and what do you think the keys are in that area?
Oh, I love this topic because that gets to the heart of what makes a company valuable. So, in helping business owners think about the exit, I've run into a lot of business owners that are like, I'm never selling my company. I'm going to die in the chair. And that used to really honk me off in terms of an attitude. And then I got my head around it. And it's like, no, that's entirely fine. If you want to die in the chair, good for you. I appreciate and respect that. But make sure you have a business that is transferable and sustainable, so you're not leaving a dog pile for your people behind. And what that means is the business is not dependent on you as the business owner. Other people can make key decisions in the business. You have a management team that is fully functional. And you could, if you wanted to, go sail around the world and the business would thrive without you. Or you could focus on what you really enjoy doing, and others can take care of running the business and the parts of the business elsewhere. So a lot of that has to do with dependence on the owner. Other dependence issues that come up in terms of sustainability are the term is customer concentration, but it's basically dependence on one or two big customers. So if I hear somebody who is working with Walmart as a customer, or some of the big players, and they're like, yeah, they're my biggest customer, I'm like, oh, that's not good. Because if that number one customer that is more than, say, 15% of your revenue decides they don't like you anymore, that could disrupt the sustainability of the company. Same thing is true as we're seeing with the supply chain issues with deep supplier concentration. And if you're relying too heavily on one supplier for key components in your manufactured products or things of that nature. So, and there are other things that go into it, but those are some of the key things that make it hard for a company to transition from one owner to the next if they're not addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Martha, my final question for you this morning has to do with your own personal or professional legacy. When you look at your life in business and personally, how do you think you would want that to be defined?
I think my personal and professional legacy, I put together my own value statements and my own mission, and it all comes down to service. Was I of service to others in my professional career, in my personal career? And if I can meet that litmus test, I'll be quite satisfied. That's just the way that I was raised, and I recognize that I have a lot to be grateful for in my life, and being able to help others is one of those gifts and pleasures. So that's when you ask that question, it's like it's being of service.
Yeah, absolutely. I share the same sort of philosophy, because I truly believe if you pay it forward to other people, the rewards you get personally will multiply. So I agree with you. Absolutely. And if people want to get connected with you personally, Martha, what's the best way they can do that?
The best way to get in contact with me, go ahead and visit the Family Business Consulting Group website, which is thefbcg.com. And you can shoot me an email at Sullivan at thefbcg.com. .com, or the other website you can visit is www.provenancehill.com, which is another company that I lead. So it's been a pleasure talking with you today, Kevin.
Well, absolutely. I want to thank you for making some time to talk to me about business diversification and sustaining businesses. Your work and the space and time on my behalf is most appreciated, and I really enjoyed engaging in conversation with you this morning.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you so much for inviting me.